Nile Gardiner from Heritage Foundation and a former aide to the great Margaret Thatcher. Mr. Gardiner, how are you, sir?
Fine, thank you very much. Great to be here. How are you?
Very good. First of all, does that make sense, like that most people don't really know what this is, and probably most people in the media don't even really understand the full ramifications or importance of this either?
Yeah, I don't think the media really has given enough credit to the significance, the huge significance of what we saw yesterday. In fact, I was at the White House attending the signing ceremony of the Abraham Accords, and it was a magnificent event. It was one of the most moving and powerful events that I've been to in Washington for many, many years. And you had the leaders there of the United States, Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain all sitting down together, signing an historic agreement that is going to significantly advance peace in the Middle East. And the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain are two very significant U.S. allies in the Arab world. The Gulf states, they are key partners for the U.S. They have signed an agreement to normalize relations with Israel, which is a very, very big deal for Arab countries to do. So the last time we saw an agreement like this was actually with Jordan back in 1994. So this is immensely significant, and it greatly strengthens, I think, U.S. leadership in the Middle East. It strengthens the anti-Iran coalition that President Trump has been building. I think it enhances Israeli security, and this is a very good deal for all sides here. And I think tremendous credit is due actually to President Trump and the Trump administration for driving this process through against all odds, frankly. And this is a deal Barack Obama could never have achieved actually as president.
Well, had 8 years, didn't do it. Can we break down some of the players? Let's start with the UAE, United Arab Emirates. What do we need to know about them and their motivations and values and et cetera?
Well, the United Arab Emirates, of course, is a key Gulf player, basically. They're very close to Saudi Arabia, of course, which is the regional power in that part of the world. And this also raises hopes that the Saudis as well may sign a deal with Israel. So the fact that the UAE is moving forward here is very, very significant. And the United Arab Emirates is a key part of the US-led anti-Iran coalition. And so, I think that on so many levels, this is a very, very important move here. And the UAE is a country that, in my view, is very strategically significant for the United States in that region.
Why would the UAE not have had normalized relations with Israel up until now?
Well, it's really all about the Palestinian issue, and that's the key issue for many of the Gulf states here. So the UAE has, resisted previous attempts actually to sign this kind of agreement because of the Palestinian issue. And certainly we saw, some movement by Israel on this issue in terms of annexation of settlements in the West Bank. And the Israelis certainly, under Benjamin Netanyahu's leadership, certainly have done all they can to make an agreement that does not compromise the safety and security of Israel. And I think that this is an agreement where, I think all sides have actually come to the negotiating table. They've made some concessions on all sides here, but certainly the sticking point was the Palestinian issue. It is of course important to note that the Palestinian leadership is opposed to the deal, because the Palestinian leadership, of course, is close to Hamas and an array of terrorist organizations. So the Palestinians are not cooperating with this deal. But what is most important here is you've got some of the biggest players actually among the Gulf states who have signed up to this agreement. They're now putting tremendous pressure on the Palestinians to fundamentally reform their ways and their behavior. So this is a real game changer for the region.
Okay, so you said the UAE is a pretty influential force over there. What about Bahrain? Are there any differences between Bahrain and UAE, or is it the same sort of deal?
Well, Bahrain is also an important player in the region. Bahrain also holds a very large U.S. naval base as well. And so Bahrain is a long-term U.S. military partner. And so the U.S. has long held, a strategically close relationship with Bahrain. And the fact that you have Bahrain and the UAE combined joining this agreement means that this significantly enhances the possibility of Saudi Arabia actually signing a deal as well with Israel. And the Saudis, of course, are the regional sort of superpower there. And I think that the fact that you've got two countries here, not just one, signing onto this historic Abraham Accord agreement, I mean, this is a big achievement. And we've not seen a deal like this actually in the past. So you've had two countries actually normalizing relations with Israel. And so we cannot underestimate the significance of this.
Well, that's amazing. So what does the deal say exactly? What does normalizing relations mean? I've heard that.
Yeah.
And the second part of that is, what did Trump / America / Israel have to give up, right? Because I feel like it's the give and take, right? We were told with the Iran deal, we had to give up all these things, including cash, to the Iranians. Did we have to do any of that for this type of deal?
Yeah. Well, firstly, with regard to what this deal actually does, so the normalization of relations means the full restoration of diplomatic relations, or the full implementation of diplomatic relations between the UAE, Bahrain, and Israel. It also means basically the implementation of full economic ties as well. And this is very important for the region. I mean, this is a deal that advances prosperity, trade, investment, economic freedom in the region. And so, this is a good deal for the Middle East. It's a job creator, actually. It's also good in terms of foreign direct investment coming into the region. And so when you combine, the implementation of diplomatic political ties together with trade and investment, this is a win-win situation for the whole region here.
That's really interesting, the trade part. If I could jump in real quick, the trade's really interesting. I haven't thought about that or heard anything about that. What would be an example of something that wasn't traded that now could be traded?
Yeah. So for example, Israel is actually an international leader in high tech pharmaceuticals. So the Israelis are working on a vaccine for COVID-19, as is the United States, the United Kingdom, and other countries. And I think that the cooperation between Israel and the Gulf partners on medical technology, for example, is very good for the region, and that's an example of how this kind of cooperation will save lives in the long run.
Wow. And do you believe? Are you of the thought that companies that trade and cooperate together, I guess except for American China perhaps, but generally are peaceful?
Yes, yeah, exactly. The more investment and trade you have between countries, the less likely you're going to have conflict. And so the economic dimension is a big part of all this as well, and it's great actually for creating jobs actually, and for enhancing the prosperity of the region. And this was a big part of the US-led initiative. And you asked a question about whether the United States made any concessions here, and in my view, the United States did not have to make concessions here. I mean, this was a win-win for America as well. It is fundamentally different to the awful, disastrous Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA, which greatly strengthened Iran at the expense of the United States and Israel and its allies. And the Iran deal is very strongly opposed by the UAE and Bahrain and all of the Gulf states here. And so this is a deal that's totally different, actually, to the Iran nuclear deal. And it did not require the United States sacrificing its interests. In fact, this is a deal that really advances America's strategic goals